Let's now shift our focus to Washington. It is hosting a meeting of the G20 Finance Ministers, but all is not well there. The group of 20 appears to be falling apart in the American capital. The US Treasury Secretary, for example, is planning a walkout. Janet Yellen does not want to be a part of any session that involves Russia. Let's get to the basics first. What is the G20? You could call it the world's premier economic forum. Its members are the world's developed and emerging economies. And like you can see, Russia is very much a part of this grouping. Russia was once also a part of the G7, the group of 7. Back then, it used to be the G8, but Russia decided to annex Crimea. That happened in 2014. And as a punitive measure, the G7 countries threw Russia out of the forum. Now, the same Russia has invaded Ukraine. It has launched a full-fledged war. Over 2,100 people have lost their lives in Ukraine. Nearly 3,000 others have been injured. So, shouldn't Russia be thrown out of the G20 too? That's a question that has been asked multiple times, but there is no consensus yet. And arriving at one will not be easy. Throwing Russia out of the G20 would need the nod of all members, including countries like China and Indonesia. Now, Indonesia is the current president of the G20. It has gone ahead and offered an invitation to Russia. Moscow will be attending with a full delegation. Leading it will be Russia's finance minister, Anton Siluanov. He will be a part of most discussions, although virtually. He will be sending out a message to the West that it's all business as usual. The United States does not want to share the room with Russia. So the Treasury Secretary Yellen will be skipping meetings that have Russian representatives. Yellen will not be the lone protester. Rishi Sunak, the UK Finance Minister, will be skipping certain sessions as well. Chances are representatives from Germany and France will be walking out too. What about the rest? This brings us to the second part of the problem. The war in Ukraine has divided the G20. There are clear blocs. One bloc has sanctioned Russia, the other has not. Together, these two blocs represent 80% of the global output, 75% of international trade, and 60% of the world population. Today, the G20 mirrors the rest of the world in terms of the division over Russia. And the result does not look rosy. Officials from France and Germany warn that there may not be a joint communique at the end of the meeting, meaning no joint statement. The situation is far from ideal. In fact, it hints at a crisis. You see, there are important decisions to be made, be it in regard to the Wuhan virus pandemic or supply chain disruptions or the global price rise. The G20 must jointly address these issues and arrive at a consensus. The lack of consensus defeats the very purpose of the grouping. And what is the purpose, you ask? Let me read it out from the G20 website. The G20 holds a strategic role in securing future global economic growth and prosperity. As I speak, the global economy is facing its biggest challenge in decades. The Wuhan virus pandemic has set off global inflation. The war in Ukraine has added to the soaring prices of the commodities. The G20's failure to cooperate or arrive at a consensus now will set off a new international order, one that is dictated by a fragmented global economy. Experts are prepared for this. The International Monetary Fund has already issued a warning. The chief economist has said, and I'm quoting, one scenario is one where we have divided blocs that are not trading much with each other, that are on different standards, and that would be a disaster for the global economy. In short, the walkouts in Washington will take the world a step closer to more economic troubles, something that the world cannot afford right now. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.